What is up? How's everybody doing? Bobby Conway here with my good friend John McCray from What Do You Mean? John, what's up, dude?
What's up, my man? Good to see you, man. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. That's right. Last time we were together is when we were suffering for Jesus in Kiowa Island, South Carolina, in a massive home, dreaming about future of YouTube, right?
Oh yeah, man, that was terrible. But we got to do what we got to do,
Yeah, I think that's important that we support each other in the Lord, and when we are suffering in a big house like that in South Carolina with a hot tub on the beach, I think it's really pertinent that we're there like we are in the coronavirus season, just trying to be there for each other.
Amen.
So, amen. Well, hey, if you're joining us, we're thankful for you chiming in. Doing some great stuff. If you've seen him we're getting interrupted by Tim. Come back in, Tim.
Oh, well, you were frozen for a second, so I just wanted to make sure that people knew.
Have you seen Frozen, Tim?
Oh yeah. My gosh, so many times.
You have. What's the theme song?
Well, Let It Go is
Let It Go. That's right.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so
how does it go, Tim?
All right,
Tim,
so
how does it go?
Let us go.
Let it go.
Okay. Well, this whole ministry of yours, John's really taken off on YouTube. It's really exciting to see what you're doing. Talk to us, because one of the things that we did talk about while we were away at our time together in Kiowa, for those that might not be aware, we had some different YouTubers together that had significant platforms. We were dreaming about how we could do some stuff together in the future. So like John and I doing stuff right now, we're just introducing our audiences to one another. And so right now, we wanted to bring John on our channel and let him just talk to you guys about some of the things that are going on. And so, John, tell us a little bit about what's behind What Do You Mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, man, thanks, by the way, for having me on. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah, so I started the channel about 2 years ago when I was online. It was at a time where I was like doing all these debates online with atheists and stuff, because I just had surgery and I was out of work for a while. So I was just doing debates and stuff for a while. And then I started seeing all these memes. And I was like, I wish somebody would just sit there and just destroy these memes, right? These atheist memes, because they were also kind of silly and stuff. And I know they weren't intended to be like serious arguments, but they're still influential because they're kind of sound bites and it fits in well with the culture. So like I started thinking, I was like, that'd be cool. But like, I thought about starting a channel, but not really. Like one guy that I knew, a Christian guy, was like, man, you need to start a YouTube channel. He's like, you'd be great at it. I was like, nah. And then he, and I knew him from debates online and stuff. He was a Christian guy that lived in Australia. And then he just like bought me a camera and was like, yep, start your channel and then see how it goes or whatever. So that's how I got into it. And then I just started doing a bunch of memes. And then I knew I wasn't always going to be doing memes, because I was like, I know they're going to be temporary in some sense. So I was like, I'll do responses to anti-Christian videos as well, and also slogans. And yeah, that's about it, man. So that's how I got started.
What is some of the top feedback that you hear about your channel? Like when you have people like reaching out and they're saying, man, this is where you're resonating with me. What do you feel like it's that they love about your channel?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get a variety of different things that different people like,
Yeah.
And I'll get different things at different times. One thing that I do wrong on my channel, which I wish I did right from the beginning, is I have it a little bit too wide, because I have like skits, and then I talk about like culture stuff. Then I talk about like some more kind of academic type atheist stuff. And, so I'm a little bit too broad, which isn't good for the YouTube channel. So like, it depends on kind of what I'm posting. You know what I mean? I'll do stuff on like false prophets, or I'll do stuff on like, like the Kalam or whatever, so that's kind of the thing. But I'm trying to think, like the common kind of theme I think I get is, for some reason, it resonates with a lot of skeptics and stuff a lot more. I don't tend to get as much kind of hate and stuff for some reason. And so it's just the approach that I kind of take. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, just to know you's to love you. I mean, and I mean that in the most highest way I could possibly say it. You're very easygoing. I think your approach to Christianity, and contextualization and your thoughts there, are really critical. I love some of your thoughts on understanding people, and for the crowd, you need to know this dude loves the Enneagram. Spend 5 minutes with John and talk to us a little bit about how even just your understanding of Enneagram or people's. Hey, John, check it out. My glasses are they're smogging me up here, bro. I'm like getting steamed out because so if the fog happens completely, dude, it's just I'm enjoying my coffee. All right.
Yeah.
So the blur effect's happening. But how much does that play into what you do? What do you mean with an understanding of people?
So with the Enneagram, it's something I don't talk about a lot because some Christians are really kind of for it, and some Christians have like a lot of theories and stuff for it. I don't use it in some sort of like spiritual way or something like that too, but I think that it does have predictive power when it comes to what we're motivated by. And so I think that what I've learned in doing evangelism and discipleship and stuff is that different people have different barriers and for different reasons. So and it's not, I mean, you could really use any kind of personality test, but I think in today's culture, people are so diverse because they're so individualistic that you can't use just like a cookie cutter approach for anybody and everybody. Right. So this is why like, I've learned like, all the different kind of personality tests through the Myers-Briggs and all these other different ones too, because of the fact that you have to really specify your approach to who you're talking to. I think today, in order for it to be largely effective. Now, that's not to say that you can't sometimes do broad brush stuff, but it doesn't work like it used to because we have so much individualism now today in culture. And so part of what I like about the kind of personality tests and stuff is that you can even see yourself deeper and start seeing your sin nature deeper too as well. Because a lot of our strengths, our superpowers are also our biggest weakness. And so we don't really have a good way to decide like, we can put it this way, we can justify anything with our superpower because it's kind of like we say, this is like our gift, you know what I mean? This is what we're good at. That's what we're made to do. But at the same time, it also enables a lot of really bad behavior. So when you have these personality tests and stuff like that, it really helps to give you a little bit more precision to where you're being more selfish, even when you think you're not, And so as learning myself over the last couple of years and stuff too, I was like, this well goes deeper and deeper than I initially thought. Like I was like, man, I'm way worse than I thought. The more that I learn about myself and the more that I stay into God's word and all this stuff, the more that I realize that, man, I'm fallen. And so that actually gives you an increased understanding of your own sin, which humbles you, because then you just realize you're no better than anybody. And the more humble you get and the more that you accept God's mercy, the softer that you become too, in relation to other people's sin, not in a bad way too, where you compromise it, but in an understanding way where you realize we're all on the same playing field here and we all need a savior in the same way. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that having an understanding of where people are and different backgrounds, I've said many times, we're all product of our mentoring, the books we've read, the culture we've lived in, our pain, our experiences. I think that when we try to understand that, when you take tools like the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram and understand that people are different, at least it sets us to try to understand better. And I think understanding our culture, if we're going to reach it, is crucial. And the fact that you're getting atheists and non-believers, paying attention to your channel and enjoying it and hearing your heart, I think is a big thing. I remember I was at a conference once many years ago, and I was there as an attendee. And I was so frustrated because the person behind me was typing so loud and I was gesturing, trying to let the person know behind me, like doing everything I could just to I was just like, come on now, what's up, bro? Like, tune it down. And all of a sudden, after I'm gesturing and stuff, I sense something touch my foot under the pew. And I go, what the heck? And I looked out and a golden retriever came underneath the pew. Well, guess what happened in that moment? I realized that the person wasn't trying to be annoying. They were using Braille and they were blind. Yeah. All of a sudden, my perspective completely shifted because I had an understanding that I didn't have before. And I think that when we're trying to reach people, some people are going to be more motivated by the head, aiming at their head, more by heart, relationship, more by hand, social justice. Some people are going to be more left brain, logical, analytical. Some people are going to be more right brain, creative types. And what I love about you when I spend time with you is you have a great EQ for people. And that's what I think, for me personally, is going to continue helping you to help others to be an effective apologist. How important do you think it is that we do have a proper EQ in apologetic work, John?
No, appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's critical, because the way I think about it is like this. Jesus came down to our world. Okay, I'll put it this way. Jesus could have just dropped the Bible down from heaven, right, on a string and said, this is all you need to know, go for it, right? But he actually came to put himself into our space-time and came and lived among us and learned our language and took the time, because that's what love is. You take the time to meet people where they're at. You know what I mean? And I think that that's critical, because I mean, my best friend, like, he's like been patient with me for like the last 3 years, and that's been a huge impact into my growth, I think, intellectually and spiritually and everything else. But when you really think about it, like, he loved me enough to take the time to really help me, you know what I mean? Not on just a superficial way. It's like, hey, I'll pray for you, man. Peace. You know what I mean? Yeah. But instead worked with me through a lot of stuff that, you know, a lot of issues that I had intellectually, emotionally, and everything, you know, practically everything. So I think that when you love people, it's going to cost you something, right? It's it's not love if you do something that doesn't really cost you anything, you know, but love is costly, you know what I mean? So one of the reasons why I think Christianity is so beautiful is because it costs God something to forgive us. You know what I mean? And that same kind of mindset, I think, spending the time into people and stuff like that, I think is absolutely critical in order to show love a lot. So that's why I think it really helps to get to know people in an intimate way. Like First John talks about that know, you know what I mean? That kind of intimate know. And so, yeah. Well,
what do you think right now as we're here in the coronavirus situation? I mean, our world's changed a lot, John. I posted on YouTube just a little live video yesterday sharing how I went to a restaurant to get some takeout Chinese the other night, and when I paid for my food, they handed me a toilet paper roll, a gesture of kindness. And I thought, wow, man, I'm getting smoked out here. I said, man, that was, I hate that, man, when my face, I don't know what it is, but my room right now is just burning up.
Yeah, it's hot here too. Yeah.
Woo. But yeah, I left the Chinese restaurant. I thought, wow, I was here a couple weeks ago on a date night before the coronavirus outbreak. And had I known 2 weeks later, I'm going to be being handed a roll of toilet paper as an act of kindness. And I think how fast the world has changed. You know, what is some of the way you're trying to minister to your audience and to your family as it relates to this new season that we're in right now?
Yeah, it's wild, right? I mean, it is kind of crazy because, like, I started paying attention to this back in December, and I was just thinking, like, the implications. I said, what happens if this crosses borders and starts getting everywhere? And then what happens if it gets into America? And like now, the way that it's looking and stuff like that, you worry about the economy and stuff, right? Like the economy is going to have to, in some way, crash. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would assume it'd be a miracle if it didn't, but I just can't imagine otherwise. You have to have the whole world's the economic systems to come to a halt for the most part. You know what I mean? So I don't know what they're going to do. Like everybody is going to be affected by this in one way or another. And that's what's so crazy about it. It's not an America thing. You know what I mean? It's not just a China thing. It's a everybody thing, you know? And so like, I think it's wild, man. But I do think that like, I recently did a video talking about it, and I quoted from Philippians 4, 11 through 13. Whoops, I'm echoing a little bit. But yeah, from Philippians 4, and it's basically where Paul's talking about, he's basically talking about how in all circumstances, he can do all things, because he said he knows what it's like to be hungry and poor, you know, and he knows what it's like to be well fed, you know, and in all these different situations he compares. And I relate to that because I grew up pretty broke. I didn't grow up in a broke neighborhood, but I was broke in that broke neighborhood. I went to a neighborhood where we shouldn't have been. I mean, we got accepted into this other school, but anyways, that's not where we're supposed to be. But anyways, so I relate to that because I know what it's like to be poor, and I know what it's like to be hungry, but I also know what it's like to be well fed and stuff too. But that common theme throughout all the situations that you're in is that you can do all these things because you will be okay, because you have Christ that will give you your strength. You know, and so I think that that's kind of good advice for Christians throughout this. Like, and And there's a few things too, a few more things, but that's one of the things I think is that for us, our mindset is that we want to know that no matter what happens, we can make it through whatever, it will be okay because we have Christ. So whether we live or die, still we have Christ, so we have a different hope that's not available to non-believers, I'd say, in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts I've been having about this as well, John. Like, for example, I went out the other night just to make some cheese enchiladas for the family. And did you know, it took me 3 grocery stores. None of them had corn tortillas. I ended up going to a Mexican restaurant and paying like $6 for 15 tortillas to go home and make dinner. And I told my daughter, I was like, well, hey, this will be a story for you someday, basically.
Yeah.
Your grandkids and stuff, how you and your dad during the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Going through grocery stores, man. And you had to show up at a Mexican restaurant.
I think about that all the time, man. Like with my kid, I was like, my boy's 5 right now. And so I'm telling him why he's not in school and stuff. I'm saying like, people are sick. And he's like, why, and then I was watching some news on it or whatever. And they're talking about the people eating bats in China, right? These exotic animals. And he's like, why are people eating bats? You know what I mean? I was like, well, people do weird stuff sometimes. I was like, but we got to stay in because, we're trying not to get sick, and trying to give a good balance. Because some of this parenting stuff, man, I'm just trying to learn how to navigate. Like, I'm trying to give a good balance of like, what does he need to know? What does he not need to know? You know what I mean? Even with something like this, you know what I mean? So it's a weird situation and time that we're living in.
Yeah, I started teaching this past week.
You can keep going. I'm just going to turn on my light.
No, that's a good idea. It's getting, well, you know what? Yeah, it's getting dark where you are, right?
Yeah, it is, man.
Colorado. I started a series in the Book of Ruth. And, Naomi, interestingly enough, her name means pleasant. And she was living in Bethlehem, the house of bread. But they left Bethlehem and went to Moab because of a drought. And they were in spiritual drought because they lived during the time of the judges where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But then there was this physical poverty that they were going through because there was no bread. Well, by the time she ends up coming back from Moab to Bethlehem, she had already lost her husbands and her 2 kids. And people are like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi, pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. She said, for the Lord's hand's against me. And I thought, when you look at Naomi in that story, there's some principles that we can remember. Number one, we tend to push away those we need the most. She's telling Ruth and she's telling Orpah, go, go, go. But she needed community. Not only that, we tend to blame God when things go bad. And the book of Ruth is really the book of Naomi, showing us how she learned to find a sense of being the pleasant one again through trusting God. What do you think some of the advice is that you would share, temptations that we need to avoid in this critical season while we're quarantined to keep our relationship from going off the cliff?
Yeah, no, that's good points right there too. I think that one thing to think about is that I don't think we should be trying to take more than what we need. And I hesitate when I say this, and I'm talking about like hoarding stuff, right? I hesitate when I say this only because I know that it's subjective, right? And so I can't give a definite guide of what everybody should, how much like toilet paper people should stock and stuff like that. But I think that like we have a hope that's unlike the rest of the world, and we exercise wisdom, and we want to actually, our lives we live as living sacrifices, you know what I mean? And so I think that within reason, I think that we shouldn't be afraid to help others in times like this, right? I mean, this is, again, I mean, we have a different place that we're starting from than the rest of the world too. So I think unbelievers should just try to find ways that you can help people and love people too. I mean, this is like kind of back to what we were talking about at the beginning, but when you love somebody, you want to do what's best for them. And what's best for them is not for you to just hoard a bunch of stuff when they're in need. You know what I mean? Like, do what you can to help the people around you. And if you're sick, or if you think you know, or even if you're not sick or whatever, at these kind of times, you want to try to stay away from people that could be vulnerable to it, you know? So try to think of ways in your practical life that you can give and show God's love, you know? Don't hoard your money and all this stuff too. I know that's how people are tendencies to think just, you know, you have to hoard all your money, but just exercise wisdom in this. And if God has blessed you with whatever he's blessed you with, then that's a something that you'll use in order to glorify him. So I just would advise people to just think about that in a biblical way and think what you can do to help other people. And then if you feel convicted about, hold on to stuff or something like that, see how you can distribute it in a wise and effective way.
Yeah, those are good words, John. And that's kind of speaking of our influence kind of outside. How things feel in the McCray home right now? Any intense fellowship around there? You guys feeling nuts? You guys ready for some space at home?
Yeah, man. It's kind of wild because this whole time too is like when I just started full-time videos, right? You know what I mean? And everything has been going crazy around here too. Yeah, I mean, I did a video recently talking about my wife's health, and we all are at a higher risk too. Because she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which I didn't even know anything about, but it's like an autoimmune disease basically. And also too, I have chronic pericarditis, which is where the sac that holds your heart gets inflamed. And so whenever I get sick, it starts acting up and it shuts me down kind of for a few days. And so like, I know that I'm probably at a higher risk too, if I were to get coronavirus, which I'll probably inevitably get, I don't know, but I'm at a higher risk too. And then so is my wife, because she's asthmatic as well too. So it's kind of crazy, but at the same time, like, we know, like, whatever happens in my mind, whatever happens, the worst that can happen is that, we end up with Jesus some way, you know what I mean? But I'm not too worried about it that way. So we're just trying to work together, trying to get all this logistics and stuff, and with the ministry, and, obviously you're going to be losing more support and stuff in these kind of times and stuff, so we're just trying to figure out ways to navigate, but we're blessed and we'll be okay. So.
Yeah, I want to encourage everybody listening. If you're not a subscriber at What Do You Mean, I would encourage you to go and subscribe, like, share John's channel with others, and jump aboard his Patreon team as well. I know for YouTubers right now, there's critical work to be done right now in the ministry. And so I feel like it's a great ministry to support. And we're so thankful for John and his work. And just please keep him in mind and keep his family in your prayers as well. I think, this is a time that I've been thankful for the last, my wife and kids, like, we know what it's like to get sideways with each other, and and we're just living constantly together. And I've been really thankful overall. We've been really getting along good right now, but I can tell, like, in certain moments, like I said to one of my kids yesterday, you need to go out and get some exercise in right now.
Yeah.
I feel for myself, like the other day I was on edge around the house, and I was like, I even asked for the grace card. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing the best today. If I can just get some grace. And
good.
If we can just recognize the importance of giving each other some space, of getting exercise. I know it's something that's real crucial for us as a family, to make sure that we're not getting all of this energy pent up so we don't snap at each other. Because, man, I really worry about that. Like,
yeah,
it's really easy for some families just to throw each other out of the house in a season.
Yeah, man. I was thinking that too, like, especially too, like the exercise thing and stuff, like the gyms are closed over here and stuff too. So like, and I'm the type that has to get out of the house for my brain to start working. You know what I mean? I have to get out and go to the gym or whatever to start getting my brain kind of going. But like being on lockdown, man, like it's nuts. You know what I mean? Like, and it was snowing here a couple of days ago and stuff too. So I was like, can't even go on walks, have to stay in the house. You know what I mean? And that can get to you. But thankfully, we've been okay in that aspect. You know what I mean? But I think too, the reason why is because we were kind of waiting for this moment, because we spent so much time apart. You know what I mean? Because I was working and doing videos and other stuff too, and teaching and stuff. And so now we're thankful for the time together. But I mean, you never know, man. I completely agree with you that like people are going to need space. It's easy to get that built up anger, like you said. I mean, that built up kind of, those little annoyances, right? You know what I mean? And I've started checking those in myself though, because I get those too, like those little frustrations, and then like they just keep growing. You know what I mean? You're like, so I try to check it on myself and try to find ways to kind of cope with it. But I get you, man. I know exactly how it goes.
Yeah, one of the things that I have been thankful for, I'm going to do what you did, is I'm scooting back in my chair and I'm going to open my window to get some fresh air in.
Oh yeah, you're good, man.
One of the things that I've been thankful for is, early on when we were married, my wife and I had really great routines, like praying together daily. And then, we started raising the kids, and then life just got busy. And before you know it, some of these things that were once a real part of our marriage just sort of went by the wayside.
Yeah.
And, I was talking to my dear friend, Brian Loritz, a couple weeks ago. And while we were chatting, I was like, bro, he's asking, how you doing spiritually, Bobby? And I was talking to him. I said, hey, I got a favor. I want you to ask me next time we talk how I'm doing with praying for my wife, because I feel like I need to be doing a better job there. And that was kind of like before this quarantine thing went down. And lately, that's one thing that's good, I think, is coming out of it, is I feel like I'm taking time to just pray with my wife. And there's something about, it's hard to be bitter at each other if you're praying together, right? I mean, it's hard to go into the presence of God. And so
it depends, though. If you do one of those, like, Lord, please help her see the truth. She's just so stubborn. Can you just help her? Is that how you pray?
My spirituality would never do that, right?
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. You're better than me. No.
Yeah, you're like, dude, come on. Yeah.
So I'm the only one that does that? No.
No. Hey, misery loves company, bro, and I'm right there with you, dude. So John, talk a little bit like rhetoric, okay? Like, one of the things that I can get grieved by, and it's not, I wouldn't point my finger at just atheists, like with harsh rhetoric toward Christians. Sometimes I see the same thing on our side.
Yeah.
And it really bothers me that people that have diverse opinions can't get along without belittling each other. How important do you think it is for us to have the right kind of rhetoric? And why do you feel like people are so insistent on being so degrading to other people?
Yeah, no, there's a lot to say on this. This is something I've obviously thought about over the last couple of years too, of my channel and what kind of approaches I want to take and that sort of thing. The way I look at it, I'm trying to think of where to start, but I'd say that, okay, first, the situation that we're in today, this is think about how polarized politics and stuff are right now, and everything's turned into to rhetorical points and stuff, and these sound bites that are emotionally strong that gets you to hate the other side and stuff like that, the polarization that comes. And I think part of this is due to social media and the algorithms and how they're designed. And I think it's an inevitable outcome of the algorithms, because the algorithms want to get you to see people you already agree with. So that way they can sell you products, because now they have a target audience to sell you products and stuff. Or sometimes they'll occasionally are going to show you people you disagree with, because they know if it ticks you off, then you're going to spend more time there debating people and stuff like that, and they can sell more products. So it's really conditioned, I think, the news outlets and everything else to do this. You can listen to the same news story from Fox and CNN and get two like insanely different stories. Like, it's hard to get objective news these days, right? And I think a lot of it comes to because people are fueled by feelings now instead of facts. Feelings is I say that kind of loosely. I want to say, I think more precisely is virtue signaling, I'd say. But now with that said, I think that regardless of how we ended up here, we have to play the game in some way. Now, this doesn't mean that you should be like, a snobby or something like that, as, some, non-believers or whatever. Not saying that they're more snob or less snobby than us or whatever. But the thing I want to say is that, like, you want to play the game. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, I want to love people again, right? You want to do what's best for them and what they will find compelling, at least you're not sinning, right? Because I think about how Jesus changed his tone when he was talking to different people. You think how he talked to the woman at the well next to how he talked about the Pharisees, or talked to the Pharisees, radically different, right? He's calling the Pharisees names, saying, your father's the devil, and the whitewashed tombs and all this stuff, right? And there's a reason for that, because the people that he's talking to, that's the thing that's going to reach them, right? And so I don't do anything out of like malice or anything like that. If I do be rhetorical and stuff like that, I'm never trying to do it that way. Instead, what I'm trying to do is use their same logic to expose a flaw in their logic, so that way they can be open to considering Christianity. You know what I mean? Because if they're just driven by these empty facts and rhetoric, well, if you can be rhetorical too as a Christian in a way where they can understand it, and it's just not like overtly offensive, because you don't want to offend for no reason, right? But if you can do that too, and then also Christianity is true, so you have objective facts and logic, I think, on your side as well. So then I think that you're more equipped, you know what I mean? So you can expose it with the same tactic, you neutralize it. Now they're like, oh, who do we trust? What do we do? Then you give them some other like facts and logic and something to supplement that. So that's kind of my mindset, my kind of basic approach. Because you'll notice I'll talk different to atheists than I do Christians, and then to the ones that like follow the false prophet, I talk different to them. And whatever group I'm talking to, I'm talking different to them intentionally, because I'm talking to them in ways that's going to be more persuasive to them, and what my end goal is, trying to get them to see the gospel in some way.
Yeah, that's so good, John. I mean, again, that's getting back to that emotional intelligence, understanding where different people are at. I think that's huge, and I think that's the gift of some of that right brain element, that creative, that artsy, you're kind of that unique blend of some left and right brain. You like the logic and analytics, and you can appreciate that, but then you got that creative side. And that way, I think that we can share a similarity in some wiring here. And when it comes to that right brain, you don't always have this. You're in a different emotional brain states, is what I say, versus the pure left brain who can just stay in that space. But I feel like that the benefit of that is it allows you to have more empathy. But the curse of it is it can be kind of depressing sometimes. Saddening sometimes. I did see that you had William Lane Craig. You interviewed him recently. I'm guessing after he saw your chest tattoo, he went out and got one as well.
He did, actually, and he got it to say, "What do you mean, me, yo?" It was comma then yo, so it was actually it was grammatically correct.
Yeah, can't you picture Bill Craig in a tattoo parlor? Get some ink, man.
Give me ink.
Think before you ink. He was. Yeah. Well, that's great. We all love Bill and his work, and see, that's somebody right there that you can really appreciate, because here's a great scholar, and he's out there debating the greatest scholars in the world, and he's a suit and tie, and then I look over, I'm going, here's you getting an opportunity. You're working with him. I've done some work with him, and I love that. I love that kind of shared mentality of ministry where we recognize one another's gifts. Yeah. I think that's going to be huge. How important do you think networking in this apologetic endeavor is going to be for the future of reaching this culture?
I think absolutely critical, because I think if you look at like a lot of different groups and stuff, they have more unity, in the apologetics, everybody's kind of just trying to be the next William Lane Craig and stuff. So we're not really working together. And so we can't make as significant of an impact, you know what I mean? But everybody does have different gifts and stuff like that. But I think we need some more people that are more okay with not trying to be, the next William Lane Craig and stuff, and helping and supporting other people like researchers and stuff like that, you know what I mean? That can help the research and stuff for ministries and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people probably in some of these bigger ministries and stuff, but that kind of stuff, I think we need a lot, you know what I mean? And I will say too, like when I first got to the apologetic game, one guy that was always like just as accepting of me, because I'm like, I mean, let's face it, I don't really look that much like your typical apologist, right? So, but one guy that was always there and always had my back was Tim McGrew. He always had my back, was always there, always helping me out. He helped me study probability theory and stuff like that too, you know what I mean? And when I first started too, there's a lot of people that, were willing to help and stuff too, but Tim always went above and beyond. So I always appreciate him for that. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to me that Craig and Craig Blomberg and all these type of people too, don't really look at me different, you know what I mean, than they would somebody that looks like a Bobby Conway or something like that, so.
Yeah. With this hairdo, I get myself in some crazy things at times too. I'm a tie guy myself. But
yeah, no, because Bobby, you're always fresh to death, son. Always. Every time I see you, bling bling. No, just kidding.
So, John, we're going to take some questions right now and see what we got coming in. I noticed that Brandon James said, one issue as an amateur apologist I've had difficulty with is aligning the intellectual defense of why pain and suffering exists and the emotional barrier this creates. It is very easy to get past the intellectual barriers, but very difficult breaking down the emotional walls. My question essentially comes down to, have you personally come up with an effective case by combining an intellectual defense along with an emotional response? So I guess the question here is, how do you intellectually and emotionally deal with the problem of pain and suffering, John?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too, and great insight too, because you can come across as super unloving and uncaring, even if you have good intentions. But if somebody's more of a emotional person and you respond to them with just pure fact, it can come across as just offensive, even though that's not your intent. So we don't want, you want people to hear what you're trying to get them to hear, not what you're not. You know what I mean? So as weird as that sounds, but basically, if you're saying like, I care for you, I'm trying to help you, and you're saying it in these words where they hear like you're giving them a middle finger, you know what I mean? That's not good communication there. So good insight. What I would say is this: and it sucks because there's two different things. Like when I'm doing videos, I'm trying to talk to more groups, right? But when I'm evangelizing or discipling or whatever, I'm thinking of the person. So this is where personality stuff comes in handy too. You start getting more data about where they're coming from and why this offends them. What's the real core issue? And so I'll always ask a lot of questions and stuff too, to try to see what I can get as far as data to see where they're coming from, so I can best explain the answer for them or give them a response of some sort. But I think in kind of a big, broad, generic sense, I think that I think one thing that I'm always thinking when it comes to suffering is I think about, what does Christianity really say about suffering, right? Christianity, we're to expect suffering, you know, in this life, we're going to have these trials and we're going to have these tribulations. And in addition, God isn't just sitting up in heaven with his arms folded, just looking down, you know, and just can't relate to it. Instead, God actually came into our world and he suffered on our behalf, you know? So if anybody can understand suffering, it's God, you know what I mean? Because God actually suffered as an innocent person, you know what I mean? In the same way. So I think that when you think about it from that perspective, even if you don't know the answer to why God allows suffering, you know for sure on the Christian worldview that it's not because God doesn't care. And it's not because there can't be a greater good from the suffering, because the greatest good ever came from Christ's suffering, you know, because I think that this is entailed in love in some ways. Love equates, when you love somebody and you do things for them, it costs you something, you know? So that's one place to kind of start, I would say. But it really depends on the person. So I would advise people to get to know the person first before you just give like a response, you know what I mean? But that's one place to think about, you know, and you want to try to communicate in a way that they can understand. And so whenever I'm talking to people, I listen for what's important to them and why. And then when you have that information, it makes it a lot easier to give a response that will make sense to them.
Yeah, these are good words here, John. I heard it said recently, as it concerns our negative emotions, state your feelings, but don't become them. And I think that it's good to state our feelings maybe about the suffering and the evil in the world. And a lot of the Christian life is getting our emotions to resonate with what our intellect knows to be true about Christianity. So we're told that we're forgiven of our sins, yet we still feel guilty. We know we're supposed to forgive, and we've went through the process, but we still feel bitter. We know that the Bible says God is good, but we struggle understanding why he lets this happen. And so I think that a lot of this could be broadened out to many areas where what I think the healthy Christian is one in whose emotions correspond to reality. And we're trying to get that, but that's not always easy. So we can know the truth, but our emotions are sometimes out of whack. So like I've said before, like, boy, if you have fear all the time, like someone's chasing you with an axe and no one's chasing you with an axe, your feelings aren't responding to reality. And so we're trying to get that growth. And so between the intellectual life and the emotional life, that mending, it takes a lot of authentic prayer. It takes a lot of honesty, stating the feelings. And then sometimes what can happen is we have to really come to terms going, well, do I really believe my feelings more than what I'm saying I believe intellectually? Because maybe that's where the conflict rises. And then maybe I need to do some deeper work around how do I get my feelings to repent into what truth would say?
Right.
John?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of good points there too. And I wrestled with the place of feelings for a while too. I said, where do feelings belong, right? And kind of like my conclusion after kind of thinking through it a lot was that your feelings are great for a lot of things. They enhance reality and all these things, but it's not always your best tool for decision making. I don't think they were designed for decision making and for in that aspect too, and it depends on two. Sometimes people think intuition is the same thing as feelings, or their thoughts are the same thing as feelings. When I say feelings, I mean your feelings. They're not built for decision making. So I naturally, by nature, as you know, Bobby, too, I tend to naturally think with feelings. That's the way that I'm naturally wired. And so I think that's part of too why it helps me understand a lot of these skeptics and stuff like that, because I naturally think like them, right? These kind of postmodernists and stuff like that. I'm a natural postmodern, so that's how I naturally think. But as I've learned apologetics in the Bible and the gospel and stuff like this too, I've learned to think better. As I learned logic and philosophy, this stuff, I've learned to think better. And so my epistemology, the way that I come to think about or know stuff, really helped to stabilize me more too. So, but yeah, that's not to say feelings aren't great and wonderful in their own right, but I agree. Like if they're not stemming from reality, the truth about reality, then I think that they can lead you into a bunch of confusion where you just can't have clear thinking about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Moving on to another question, John. DB Sir says, if I'm not convicted about smoking about it, is it still sin? And I guess I'm assuming that this is somebody talking about maybe chain smoking cigarette versus,
Oh, I thought it's not crack. I thought he was talking about crack.
Oh,
smoking crack. Oh, he's crack. Okay, yeah. So smoking crack's not that bad. It's a gateway drug, though.
Yeah, as long as you're smoking crack,
It's a gateway drug, so you got to be careful.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. My bad. Not trying to make light of this situation. Just go ahead.
Look, we all need to know how to laugh about things in life and have fun and joke around, and then know how to be serious. But at the end of the day, I think he is talking about, hey, chain smoking cigarettes. If he's not convicted about that, is that still a sin?
Yeah. And so, yeah, with that, I'd say first, I think the starting thought is that if you don't feel convicted about something, it doesn't mean it's not a sin. This is what Paul's talking about. If it wasn't for the law, he wouldn't have known that he was in sin by coveting. You know what I mean? And so this is the good thing about the law, is that it exposes you to your sin. So again, this is where I think about the feelings as your epistemology. Your feelings is the way that you come to know things can get you in trouble sometimes, because I don't feel wrong sometimes. Like I've had times too, like early in my marriage too, where I was like, I don't feel wrong for being mean. You know what I mean? I felt like it was well-deserved, right? But that's like, I'm obviously wrong about that, right? Because the Bible it corrects me in that aspect too, because I know that that's not how I'm supposed to treat my wife and that sort of thing too. And so that's why I think that I would get away from the idea of it just being solely based on that. You know what I mean? You want to get biblical wisdom for it as well too, and then see if it fits into like a Romans 10 or no, Romans 12, I can't remember, situation. When it comes to smoking, what I would say is that like it's damaging to your body, right? It's not good for you, and we're going to suffer consequences for our choices. This is like what the Book of James talks about a lot too. So if you do make it so, like, say if I decide to go smoke crack, for the rest of my life, I could, but think about all the consequences that come from it. So I think this is one of those things you have to think through and really pray about and seek biblical wisdom about too, because if it's not good for you, if it's not enhancing your spiritual life in some way, enhancing your life, your physical life too, then I don't think it's wise. Is it a sin? I'd say probably, because you're harming your body. So I'd say probably, but I'd say that the kind of approach you want to take is like from the Bible, what can you derive about the nature of smoking is right or wrong?
Good words on, hey, just because I don't feel convicted, that doesn't mean that it's not wrong. In the same way, somebody doesn't feel guilty, doesn't mean that they're not guilty.
Yeah. Meet my friend David Wood, right?
Exactly. Meet David Wood, right? He's not going to feel guilty, but he can recognize his guilt. So at the end of the day, the principles. Am I enslaved to this? We're not to, have more than one master, honoring the temple. We have one quick KKZ asking a question, or I quick KKZ. If you can't lose your salvation, but God also won't force you into his presence against your will, what happens to Christians who go on to hate God after listening to, say, a Christopher Hitchens?
Yeah, so trying to think of what you're kind of getting at behind the question here. I'd say that if you're saved, you're saved is what I'd say. But I don't want to say for certain if people can't willfully choose to apostatize. That I'm not personally having come to resolution with. I don't believe you can lose your salvation by being bad because you didn't earn it by being good. That's something I believe the scriptures are clear on. But there are a lot of passages to me that could be interpreted that way. So it's something I'm going to have to think about and look at more too. So I'd say with that, if you can lose your salvation, I'd say that it would be under a condition like that. But at the same time, just denying Christ, I don't think is going to keep you out of heaven, because you have like Peter, for example, and Christians can do these things. We all do these things at some level deep down inside. So, but I do get your question too of like, would God force somebody to be with them that doesn't want to be there, Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, I think like, and this is just like some sort of intuition thing, but I think like if you were in God's presence, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I guess you'd have to know the nature of their conversion too, because that I wouldn't be able to examine if people are truly were saved or not in the first place.
Yeah, there's a lot of different layers to a question like that. You're kind of, getting at intonating. I do think that if somebody was to listen to the late Christopher Hitchens on a talk about, how God poisons everything and religion poisons everything, and it makes these associations that God's, the North Korean dictator, and somebody was to walk out as a Christian, if they were struggling with their affections toward God after that message, I would say if they're a bona fide Christian, they would probably really do some work in the scriptures or go after some counsel that could help them to assuage some of the angst that they're experiencing. Because I can say early on when I was listening to the New Atheist and some of the statements that would get in my head, well, I didn't just leave it there. There were times I'd hear, oh, that's a good point, or how would I answer that? And I would feel some doubts and frustrations, but I didn't just let it stay there. I would try to go and listen to people on the other side and listen to people who are painting another picture. And I'd say, if somebody's truly going to, after looking at stuff, camp out with Hitchens' perspective, then maybe they're rejecting the God of Christian theism at that point.
Yeah, and this is where that kind of weird passage comes in Hebrews 9, I believe it is, either Hebrews 9 or 7, where it's like if they've tasted, the goodness of God, it's impossible for them to turn away and be renewed to the faith, whatnot. And that is a weird kind of passage though too. But I think that, yeah, because I mean, my twin brother, right? Like at one point, he was said he was a Christian, right? And then now he's like, then he was an atheist. Now he's more agnostic. But I wonder, like, what did he believe when he believed? You know what I mean? Because even his concept of God now, to me, it's nothing I believe, of course. You know what I mean? It's wild. It's more like the way he understands God is more kind of like the weird kind of like culty stuff, or like kind of more of a Kenneth Copeland type thing, or prosperity gospel type God and stuff like that too. But yeah, so some stuff like that, I don't know, you know what I mean? And I will solidify probably my view on this. I just want to be cautious because I don't want to prematurely speak about something that I don't feel extremely confident about. So
yeah, I'm kind of in the same place where I'm looking forward to studying more on that myself. I've been wrapped up in my research for the last 6 years. And so some of these topics that maybe I committed to early on, I want to rethink some things. So I'd be with you saying we were saved totally by grace. You're not going to be able to, lose your salvation, right? If you want your salvation, the question would be, is an apostate one who was saved and genuinely leaves the faith, or never really was saved, just looks saved and leave? And there's some verses that can create some confusion around that. And anybody that would say, oh, it's just so buttoned up clear, the reason why you have Calvinists and Arminians, because you can find verses that look very Calvinistic, and you can find verses that look very Arminian, and you can find people who will try to pull the two together. And sometimes it's not like anybody's dumb on either side. And it's not like, I think some people are trying to be ill or evil or erroneous in their scripture. They're, again, products of their mentors, the books that they've read, the lectures that they've heard, the experiences they've had, the teachings they've been under. And then at the end of that, you're just trying to put it all together, and we need to be gracious with one another. So,
yeah. And I think a big problem too is people will often, our instinct is to take verses that we think solidify our position, but not put them into a systematic theology too, because you can't live like where it's like, oh, okay, well, these verses seem to say this, these verses seem to say this. And so like the last couple of years, I spent a lot of time going through these verses, a lot of time with verses about like, I want to say, I guess when it comes to a lot of these Calvinist and Arminian debates and that sort of thing too. And so, yeah, anyways, I want to say that's one piece of advice I'd give for people too, is to implement these things into a systematic theology, and also have an epistemology, like be willing to spend a ton of time on just context of just one verse. Because I mean, that's where I spent weeks going through just James 2, 14 or whatever, or months actually, and same with like 1 Corinthians 15:3 and some of these weirder passages like that too. So go through them and then see how they make sense too, but be willing to take the time and enjoy that process. That's part of the fun part too of learning God's word and what he's trying to communicate to us. So.
Yeah, I tried to memorize the entire Bible in a year, John, after I was saved.
Yeah. Did you do it?
I did it in Hebrew and Greek, and then all the different translations I'm working on memorizing those as well now.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
It's been great. It's are you working on that project?
No, well, I've always memorized the whole Bible. It's not a big thing for me. So.
No, yeah, it's humbling, isn't it? How much?
Yeah.
No.
It's humbling for me because I have to keep all of this in this head, you know what I mean? And it makes me kind of like, Ray, man, I'm a little off, but I'm a genius, so it kind of works out. Yeah.
Like Ray Man. Hey, that was the movie, right? Dustin Hoffman, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Hey, that was back in the day.
We got another.
That's going to be used against me one day. Watch. Because the guy's delusional, right? The guy's delusional. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, you are delusional, but we know, John, that's okay. You're a good kind of delusional, bro.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah, there we go.
Hillslide question says, I always hear from young people. So God says, do as I say, or you will suffer. Sounds loving, God, to me. I'm trying to make intelligent the wording here. I always hear from young people. So God says, do as I say, or you will suffer. Yeah. Sounds loving, God, to me. Okay, when you point them sometimes to the fact that bad things happen to bring people's attention to God. Can you make sense of this question here, John?
I think he's saying young people will say, yeah, because I see this meme a lot where young people will be like, or some memes will say like, oh, God loves you so much that he says he's going to send you to hell if you don't love him back and stuff like that. Let me just read again, just make sure I'm understanding it right. When you point them to something, bad things happen. Yeah, no, I can't understand your question fully, but what I think you may be saying is that would God allow bad things happen in order to get people's attention? Yeah. If that's your question, then I would say, yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, if you think about it, and this I don't think is evil at all too, by the way, and this is where it comes to allowing, evil as well too, because think how little we learn from peace. Realistically, and I remember reading that in a novel years ago when a secular author wrote this, and he said, we learn so little from peace. And I think that's so true, right? If you think to any of the times in your life, your personal life where you've grown a lot, you may have thought it was horrible what you went through, but a lot of people, in most situations, this isn't in all situations, but in most situations, people will still be happy that they went through it still because of what they've learned from it and the character they developed from it and that sort of thing too, and able to value things more and have this radical love and appreciation for others. My friend Sean, my good friend who helps out with my channel a lot, Sean from Believe in Thinkers, he was in the war, and he has had PSTD from it, you know, and but like every single time we talk, he always tells me he loves me because he tells me that he values our relationship and stuff, because he has a deeper appreciation now for his friendships and life and stuff like that too. So that's not to say that this is God's only reason for allowing evil and suffering, but I think it's a feasible one that we can understand. Same way I let my kid, you know, suffer sometimes or whatever in order to learn a greater lesson. You know, I used the dentist analogy in a video before, you know, like when he was 1, I'm holding him down, the doctor's trying to get in his mouth and he's like wondering, what the heck are you doing to me, man? You know what I mean? Why are you letting me suffer? But he couldn't understand it at that time because his brain is just too finite. And I think that we're largely in that same situation when it comes to God.
Yeah. I mean, I think about my bulldog, Winston, and there's so many illustrations this dog gets me thinking about myself with God. You know, for example, he had an eye infection and I'm trying to put drops in his eye to help heal him. And, you know, we're having to pin him down and it's like torturous because he thinks we're going to kill him. And all we're trying to do is heal his eye. You know, it's that kind of stuff where I go, man, we can't let our bulldog go outside because he barks like crazy. But then when he's inside, he wants to go outside. And I think to myself, boy, if I could just get you to see the connection between every time you go out and you start barking, you lose your outside privileges. If you want to be outside, then just don't sit there and bark at everybody and you can have outside time. So he can't understand why he can't go outside.
Yep, that's right.
There's just so many of those things that we have to remember. We got a 3.5 pound brain mass. Yes.
Well, you do.
Our mom.
Mine's
10. Yours is 10, baby. You're even the dome, baby, to let people.
That's right. That's why I'm balding and stuff too. I just can't handle it all up here.
By the way, John, I got to say, I'm thankful that D Wood hasn't come on and harassed us. He'll come on when I'm doing live sometimes. Does he ever go on and just start talking smack to you?
Yeah, he always does. That's his thing. Even when I'm with him, he'll do it to like Sam's channel and stuff like that too. He's like, oh, I got to troll Sam real quick.
He comes on. You know what he does a couple of weeks ago? He comes on and he gives $100 for a super chat. And he says, go buy yourself some drugs and alcohol. Recovery guy. That
sounds like David right there.
Oh man, that sounds like David. I did a video to him the other day. He never replied, but I just did a video. I was like, hey David, it's me. I wanted to reach out and let you know. I know that social distancing's got to be just agonizing for you, and you really probably could use some pastoral love. And I just wanted to just offer just kind of an e-hug to you in this time.
And he said, what the heck are you doing? Get away from me, loser.
Yeah, what the heck are you doing? Get away from me, right? So John, Michelle says the same chapter of the Bible that people use to condemn tattoos also says you must obey all my decrees. Guess what? Just a few of the decrees are: do not wear clothing woven from 2 different types of thread. Do not trim the hair in your temples. That's
actually the verse right before the tattoo verse too, I think. Or I think it's the one immediately before in Leviticus 1948, I think, if my memory's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess maybe the question here is, how are people able to get tattoos if the same passage of scripture in Leviticus 19 condemns tattoos and these other things? What did you say about tattoos and Christians?
Yeah, so I think that here's the thing. Let me start with I like that one, by the way. Here's the misconception, I think, about tattoos. So people think that if people come to a conclusion that it's okay to get tattoos from reading scripture, that they're just doing it because they want to justify their sin. I get comments like that all the time on an old video I did with David Wood and Vocab on tattoos. And the thing is, we never talked about this topic before, right? But we all had similar answers from just understanding the old covenants and the scriptures around it and stuff like that too. Vocab doesn't have any tattoos, doesn't want any tattoos. Same with Mike Winger. He doesn't have any, doesn't want any, but he agrees with our position because we're obviously looking at the Bible exegetically, and so that's the caveat I want to start with. But I'd say that we have to understand the context of what the purpose of the Old Testament was for, and these rules and regulations that were tied to a specific piece of land to keep the Israelites from not looking like the surrounding pagan nations and stuff. God was trying to separate them. And even if you there's countless, but like the questioner said, there's passages and stuff too, like in that same section. And I did a lot of studying on this section and stuff like this too when I was doing a lot of stuff on slavery, because you get a lot of these slavery verses from right around here on Leviticus and stuff too. And so that's what people don't realize is like, I think they're the ones cherry picking, not the other way around. You know what I mean? So understanding the context and what these rules and regulations were for. But I think that if you don't think you should get tattoos, then you shouldn't. You know what I mean? I just think it's hard to justify it, especially from the Leviticus 19:28 passage, if my memory's right. So from that passage, I think you have a harder time justifying it. But what I will say is one thing. So for me personally, this is the way I've thought about it. More so as I've grown in my personal consciousness and that sort of thing too, is that I don't want the attention to be on me in that way. I think that it can be like for some personality types, it can lead to vanity, right? You know what I mean? For some people, they're not vain about it at all. They don't care. Like David Wood, he has like some tattoos, just like a couple like cheese ones that he got a long time ago. They're like super goofy looking, but he doesn't care. Like, you know what I mean? He's not trying to get attention for it, right? And so like, if that's something that you struggle with, then I think that's something that you want to consider, you know what I mean? And so like, I think another word of caution too is like when I did the video on the false prophet in Nigeria, my tattoos weren't showing, but you could see my gauges. And for them, that's a huge stumbling block. So in this aspect, I feel like kind of how Paul did in towards the end of Romans, where he's like, if eating meat causes them to stumble or whatever, then I'm just not going to eat meat, And so in some ways, depending on who your target is or who you're talking to, it could be a impediment for you getting through to them. And so I'd exercise caution with that as well. But I think by and large for today, most people just don't care. The younger generations don't care. They're not really thinking that way, So that's not a straightforward response to it, but I think that that's biblical. I think that this is what I read these types of ways of thinking when I read the scriptures. So
yeah, the way that they're getting tattoos, even maybe some cultic symbolism behind that is completely different than the way that we're doing it. We can't make a direct correlation. For fun, I have gauges in my back, John, and I go out to a crane on the weekends and I suspend myself in midair by the gauges so I could get an endorphin release through the pain.
Oh,
that's a great thing.
Gotcha. That's pretty wild, bro.
Now that stuff, dude, you ever seen people do that, bro?
Yeah, I've seen it. That's insane. Yeah.
That stuff's nuts right there, man.
But a point on that passage too, by the way, that I forgot to mention, and you kind of alluded to it, is that the passage too talks about them making marks in their skin in honor of the dead. You know what I mean? So they were, they were doing it as pagan worship, and so that's a way big difference too. It wasn't the aspect of just tattooing, but it's the fact that they were cutting these marks in their skin to honor the dead for pagan worship. And so that's drastically different, right? Like the pagans would worship trees and stuff like that too. But if you have a tree in your backyard, you're not doing it to worship, then there's nothing wrong with it in that aspect. So, but if you have the tree in your backyard to worship it, then you are doing something wrong. So
yeah, well said. We got a question from Jabari Jefferson asking, where have you seen God's providence in your life?
Oh, all over the place, I'd say. I'm trying to think of realistically, this is one of those things where it's like, it's hard to falsify, which makes it harder as an argument. But I mean, all kinds of stuff, like even the timing, that I left my job was just right, in ways, but also it was bad in ways too. But I'd say that God has been always there to help take care of us and to guide us in paths. A lot of stuff happens in these ways where it's like the timing is just right. Because even I was talking to my best friend, and he said that he was trying hard to reach me in ways, right, for a long time. But he said that a lot of the work happened because of situations that I would end up in. And then I would just talk with him about it. And then so he didn't have to work as hard as he thought he had to in some ways, you know what I mean? And I noticed that same thing too when I'm discipling people and evangelizing, because there's some blocks again, to go back to personality stuff, where you realize this is a significant block for the person, and it's going to be really hard for them to be open to changing their mind. But then sometimes things will happen in their life that gives you that open door, and so that's one way that I see God's providence working too, because I mean, especially for my life, thank God for it. You know what I mean? That I went through what I went through. So, but yeah, I want to always be careful not to say like, give a definite to say like, God's doing this for this specific reason. Instead, my mindset is like, what can I take from this situation? What do I learn from this situation? And think biblically about all stuff. So,
yeah, the idea of being providentially led by God, I've seen the same types of things in my life. Just to give like one example, and I could share a litany of stories like this, but here's an example. I was at Saddleback Church where Rick Warren pastored. He was my first pastor. I was 21 years of age, and my wife was from Arkansas, and I was praying about going to a Bible college called Central Baptist College in Conway, Arkansas.
Weird.
And yeah, weird, right? And I had no idea how to pick a Bible college, and going to a Baptist Bible college would be the last kind of a Bible college I would have picked on my own, but there wasn't a lot of options in Arkansas, and that's where Heather was from. So I remember at about 9 o'clock in the morning, I was crying out to God in my black pickup truck, saying, God, if you want me to go to Central Baptist College, please make it clear. Literally crying out to him. I showed up at a pastor's purpose-driven church conference at Saddleback Church a few hours later in Southern California. The worship pastor, everyone shake hands with the person next to you. It wasn't coronavirus time. And you had over 2,000 people worldwide at this conference. And the person on my right, I shook his hand, and his name was Kirk from Redwood, Texas. And he met my wife, who was my girlfriend Heather at the time, shakes her hand and picks up on her accent. Says, where are you from? She says, I'm from Arkansas. And this is where it gets ridiculous. He says, oh, I used to live in Arkansas. In fact, I lived in a little tiny town called Conway. You probably never heard of it. And even more so, you probably never heard of this. There was only about 50 people or so when I went, but I went to a little tiny Bible college called Central Baptist College. So here I am praying a few hours earlier, if God would make it clear if I'm supposed to leave Southern California to go to Conway, Arkansas, to go to Central Baptist College. A few hours later, on my right, at a purpose-driven church conference with 2,000 pastors from all over the world, there's a guy who's living in Texas currently who picks up on Heather's accent, being from Arkansas, to tell us that he used to go to Central Baptist College. And that's when I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, that's wild, right?
Lots of those kind of stories, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's wild, man. And so, I think that providence is one of those things where it's hard to know exactly, what's funny is that like there was an atheist that I was debating online for years, right? And I've always kind of liked him because he was smart alecky, but I liked him, you know what I mean? Because I can handle it if I don't feel like they're being malicious or whatever, then it's no big deal. But anyways, it was funny because like I recognize him from Facebook and stuff because we all we were always like talking on there and stuff like that. And I get on a plane, and then he's the seat next to me too, which is hilarious too, because so it was like me, my wife, and then he's the one on the window seat. And so when I walked in, I was like, Tim? And he's like, John? So it was crazy. And then I was like, we were just talking about the fine tuning. What do you think about the chances of this? So but anyways, it was funny though too, but you never know, with that kind of stuff too. So, but I don't like too much credits to coincidence type stuff, just because everybody does. Like my twin brother has coincidences, and he thinks like the universe is looking out for him and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So that's why I don't like to give too much credit. But I think that God is definitely, sovereign over everything. And in some way, he understands the outcomes for everything and what happens. And we go through what we need to go through. So. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that I think some of the providence is some of the unique ways that we can detect God at work in our lives. But I can even think back before I was a believer, having certain moments where I go, man, it seems like I can see God's, fingerprint there. And so for a non-believer, it doesn't work against me at all to picture God graciously doing things in a non-believer's life, because all that will serve as part of the account one day where people will see, look,
you had this moment, you had this moment, you had this moment, but you refuse to see that as me.
Yeah.
And so I think God is providentially at work in non-believers' lives, even the ones that aren't going to believe, and all that's going to stack up to show that God was faithful in making himself known.
That's right. I agree, because there's a passage too, I think in Romans, right, where Paul says, it's actually beginning of Romans, where he's, I think Romans 1 or Romans 2. Yeah, where he says, though, he's like, don't you know that God, what does he say? Something effective. Don't you know that God allows you to have these good things so that way you can see his love? It's something to that effect. That's misquoting it, but something to that effect, and I think about that all the time.
God has made what is, invisible plain to them. Everyone is without excuse.
Yeah, that's the 120 verse. But he says something about like God allows these good things to happen to you so you can see his kindness and they will draw you to him, or something along those lines. Yeah.
God's kindness leads us to repentance.
That's not it. It's early in Romans though. But yeah, anyways, I'm sure I could find it real quick, but you can talk if it pops up.
So let me bring Tim in for a second. Tim, jump up here for a second, bro. Tim's our executive producer at 1 Minute Apologist. What's up, T-Bone?
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the conversation.
Oh, man, I've been in the conversation the whole time, just in the background.
Yeah. Facts are we don't believe you.
I know you didn't film me there, but I was there.
Sure. No, I'm just kidding.
Say that again, Bobby.
Not evidence, bro. I'm just kidding.
Any stuff coming up? Any other questions, Tim? I know that we're
that was it. Those are all the questions that I was able to gather there. I think the one question from Mr. Hill was about I think he missed a word in there about loving. Like, how could a loving God basically say you have to love me or I will send you to hell? How is that loving?
Yeah, I don't think he's saying that. I don't know any scripture that says that you have to love God or you go to hell. Loving God is not a requisite to go to heaven. People are saved in the New Testament by believing. When they believe, they're saved, And so unless you love instantly, which I don't think, it depends on what kind of love you're talking about, but I don't think that's even possible, right? Like, I didn't love my wife instantly, so I don't think that's a requisite for salvation. So I think that's just to misunderstand the Christian faith. That's just a meme that I see around, but it's just a misunderstanding of what Christianity teaches. It says, believe and you will be saved. Read John 3:16, read John 5:24, read, you know what I mean? All these passages, or Ephesians 2:8 and 9, any of them like that. And like Romans 11:16, we're just talking about you're saved by grace, not through, or that's Ephesians 2:8 and 9. You're saved by grace, not through faith. But also too, how grace is a gift, right? And it's mutually exclusive from working. If you had to earn your salvation in that way, then it would no longer be grace. So,
yeah, good word, John. One thing I maybe as a last question that I would have before we kind of close out. Do you feel like in this time, some of the online stuff, due to how many people are quarantined, that the numbers are harder to reach people right now because everybody's clamoring for people's attention online?
Possibly. I think that sounds plausible. I honestly, like, I'm not really, I haven't been following my numbers as much lately, and I haven't been doing too many videos lately, so I'm not really sure, but that's definitely possible. I think that a lot of people have been saying with their live stream count, it's been lower, so I think that definitely impacts it in some sense. It's hard for me to understand. I mean, there's so many potential like things that are happening from this situation where it's hard for me to even like know where to start, because we just don't have all the data. And then it's like hard to know, like even YouTube, like there's something going on with the algorithms and stuff now because we don't have people managing stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. You know what I mean? So hard for me to know.
Yeah, I've noticed. I mean, I feel like our live streams have been a little bit slimmer because of all the amount of people on. And I think it's great that people are learning how to maximize social media, learning what their niche is. It's the way that we communicate. And it's a good thing that people are on, and there's so many different options. But I do think that thinking through things of strategic wise of what is the best time to do this, some of those types of things. What days are the best? What are our topics? What are our themes? during this season. I know that you're a guy who does pay attention to algorithms, and I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on how to maximize doing streaming and live stuff in a time when it is pretty congested.
Yeah, I will say that from my friends that I talked to, a lot of my apologist friends, talked to a few of them, and we're all in a big group text, but 3 of them were talking about how their live streams were impacted. It seems like they weren't getting as many views and stuff like that too. As for the algorithm's going to prioritize what people want to see, but if everybody's watching different things and they have more, I mean, they're gonna, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I'd say it's because I just don't know enough in that aspect. I don't know if anybody does unless they work at YouTube, so it's hard to say. But I haven't, from the people that I talk to, their live streams have been impacted since this coronavirus. It sounds like, but then again, it could be that all of them just had like topics people weren't interested in as much, that, what I mean, which is less plausible. But I mean, I'd say that if you don't get a lot more views on this live stream because I'm here, then it's definitely the algorithm's fault is what I
algorithm. Well, I do know that YouTube just said, released today, that they're going to downgrade the quality of live streams to 720 because their servers are overrun. And I know that we had problems on our Sunday service around the 11 o'clock Eastern time hour with just Facebook itself stopping things, just their servers, not deliberately muting things, but it was just really slow getting things going. So
was that at your church, Tim, or was that on our thing?
No, well, I think it was on both actually. But yeah, I think it was just a bandwidth thing. So many people were streaming and so many more people were on that stuff was just starting to fall over. So
as if YouTube wasn't competitive enough. Like, it's hard to get videos that people can see on YouTube as it is. Now it's like way worse. You know what I mean? So it's a bad time to start up a YouTube channel, I'm assuming, for people. Yeah. That's a good time too if you have a lot of time and it works out, but man.
Yeah, but I do think you want to be strategic, like advice that people often ask us as YouTubers is, how do you go about doing that? You don't just want to start a channel up that doesn't have a purpose and doesn't serve a niche and doesn't have a vision and doesn't have a mission and doesn't have some frequency of how you're going to do it. Otherwise, you will just congest the channels. But there's a lot of people that have things to say, and if they want to say it and they figured out kind of a business plan behind it, then praise God, great, that's good. But if it's just let's just randomly start things just to hear ourselves talk, then that's not helping us very much.
Yeah, and no, that's true. And what I'd say is that I've noticed I haven't been getting notifications from channels that I usually get notifications on when they go live. So that's something else I noticed too, because I said I used to get notifications for this channel, but I haven't been recently. People go live and I don't even know. And so I think that might also have something to do with whatever's going on. I don't know how much maintenance it takes to keep up that kind of stuff or what, but yeah.
See, that's good. So maybe we're going live and all of our subscribers don't even know we're going live.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a big blow when you've got tens of thousands of subscribers.
That's the most likely conclusion since I'm here. I was just kidding. Could be that, or nobody cares about little old. What do you mean?
We do care about it, John, and that's why you're on, bro. And again, if you're watching, I want you to go and subscribe to John McCray's channel. What do you mean? Like it, share it, support it. And if you're looking for if you're feeling generous, jump on his support Patreon team. John's a great guy, doing great work, and just really appreciate you being on the program today, bro. And let's do this again.
Bro, yes, man. I'm trying to get out to California when all this stuff goes away so we can freaking chill, man. Oh, no.
You got a good ride. We know that our wives got some similarities from our conversations. We'll do some double date.
Yeah, sounds good to me, bro.
Yeah.
So, good to see you guys. Tim, good to see you too, bro.
You as well, John. And always a pleasure.
All right, bro. Peace out.
All right, peace.
Oh, man, he was like, we are out.
Yeah. He's like, we're out.
He like logged off.
We're still live actually, so
it's shutting down right now. So
okay, I see the clock still counting.